Seoul Land 246 Original Novel DouLuo DaLu. Chapter 279. Purple Demon Eyes Azura Demon Light. TL by Bagelson. Without a doubt, the higher their spirit power, the faster the spirit master returned. The dense crowd basically couldn't slow down these high-level spirit masters. They either leapt over the lower-level spirit masters, or if a bit tyrannical directly knocked them aside. Those high-level spirit masters very quickly charged to the front of their retreat. Like this, those low-level spirit masters and support-type spirit masters were naturally exposed in front of the Tang army. Galloping horses might not be able to catch up to higher-level spirit masters, but these low-level spirit masters and support spirit masters couldn't possibly outrun speeding horses. As Bibi Dong saw the godly Zudge crossbow's third volley loose, and the Sacred Dragon Legion's support type and low-level spirit masters collapse, she couldn't keep from bitterly closing her eyes. She had reacted by feel, and her orders was a mistake. Even though the enemy was powerful, the Sacred Dragon Legion was after all made up entirely from spirit masters. If they could have the high-level spirit masters move to the front, then slowly pull back, then even if there were losses, it absolutely wouldn't be as bad as now. Only, now wasn't the time to say anything. Bibi Dong shot the distant Tang San a last glance, then called out to her troop of title DouLuo and swiftly withdrew towards Jialing Pass. Before leaving she didn't forget to bring that seriously injured Snake Lance DouLuo. Among these powers, Snake Lance DouLuo was seriously injured, and the title DouLuo within that ball of red light before was directly torn to pieces. Losing 2 more people, plus Heavenly Elephant Huianzhen as well as Sacred Dragon Tuoba Xi, this time the Spirit Empire had undoubtedly suffered disastrous losses. Tang San basically couldn't manage to pursue. The other Shrek 7 devils also guarded closely in front of him. The instant he was flung back, Tang San's eyes were already blood red. How could he have failed to clearly see who it was that blocked Bibi Dong's attack for him? That was precisely his lover Xiao Wu. Xiao Wu had just used nothingness and burst kill 8-stage drop on that Mad Bear DouLuo. Seeing Tang San in danger, she hadn't hesitated to bring Mad Bear DouLuo to the rescue. Mad Bear DouLuo could still release his own defensive power in the unfixed storm, but even if he could resist some of the burst kill 8-stage drop's attack power, how could he block Bibi Dong's terrifying space-rending abyss cut? He was immediately torn to pieces. But the attack's aftermath also fiercely struck Xiao Wu, throwing her out to knock against Tang San. Xiao Wu's body was already blood red. Tang San held her tightly, doing his utmost to pour spirit power into her. "Gee, I'm fine." Xiao Wu coughed once, spitting out a mouthful of spirit power that hit the lapels of the Shrek 5 devils in front. Tang San stared blankly. He was just in confusion out of concern. Seeing Xiao Wu suffer serious injuries, he had completely panicked. Hearing Xiao Wu's voice, he returned to his senses, and eased the spirit power he was pouring into her. Xiao Wu's big eyes blinked, smiling wryly without the slightest hint of weakness. "My idiot brother, did you forget I have the invincible golden body for protection? Bibi Dong couldn't catch me, but how can I stand having so much spirit power poured into me?" Tang San then finally reacted, heaving a long sigh. He held Xiao Wu tightly, lowering his head to push his face against hers. "Idiot girl, you scared me to death." Bibi Dong's space-rending abyss cut might be powerful, but it still wasn't at the god level, and still wasn't enough to break Xiao Wu's invincible golden body. It was also lucky Xiao Wu still had one last use of invincible golden body's defense, otherwise she might have already been torn to pieces along with Mad Bear DouLuo. Tang San gave Xiao Wu's pert butt a smack. Xiao Wu miserably raised her head. "Gee, why'd you hit me?" Tang San snorted. "Even if you had already used up the invincible golden body, wouldn't you have charged up all the same?" Xiao Wu giggled. "That's why you have to pay more attention to your safety. Otherwise you can't blame me." No matter what was said, Xiao Wu being alright made Tang San heave an enormous sigh of relief. Lifting her up, he looked out over the battlefield. The field was already in chaos. The Heaven Do Empire's 20 legions were pushing straight for Jialing Pass. The Sacred Dragon Legion had lost close to half their numbers after the godly Zudge crossbow's 3 volleys, and with 6,000 Heaven Do Empire spirit masters in pursuit, the casualty numbers were constantly rising. Sword DouLuo Chen Xin, Bone DouLuo Gurong, plus the Golden Iron Triangle already incarnated as the Golden Sacred Dragon, were like a sharp spear furthest ahead, leading the subordinate spirit masters to constantly kill the escaping Sacred Dragon Legion. The Tang army had now split into 2 parts and was quietly retreating on either side. They had already manifested their effect on this battle, and in order to avoid losses, Tang San had ordered the Tang sect disciples to stay in the Spirit Master formation to support the attack, while the remaining 10,000 strong Tang army directly retreated to the rear and reloaded the godly Zudge crossbows. The Spirit Empire's 8 heavy legions had finally reached the front, letting the Sacred Dragon Legion Spirit Masters pass, while meeting the frantic Heaven Do Imperial Army. Two tides of steel, one side accelerating their attack, the other side already timid, clashed against each other. Even though there wasn't much difference numerically, those leading 6,000 Spirit Masters settled the outcome. Bibi Dong had now already returned to the walls of Jialing Pass. Even now, she was quietly spitting a mouthful of blood into her sleeve, her expression also extremely unsightly. Blowfish DouLuo whispered. "Your Majesty, how about we send the Angel Legion? Otherwise our losses." "We can't send the Angel Legion." Bibi Dong's eyes were dim and uncertain. "Before we know what those weapons that killed so many of our Spirit Masters is, we absolutely can't let the Spirit Master Legions sortie again. Spirit Masters aren't soldiers, even with our depth, it's impossible to reform them quickly. Pass on my orders, the Angel Legion is to man the walls to defend against enemy assault." That enormous hole in the walls of Jialing Pass was undoubtedly an enormous danger to the fort. If the Heaven Do Empire was a river, then this was a break in the levee. While giving her orders, Bibi Dong's gaze fell on that dark trident quietly resting deep in the ground below the walls. Finally, the surviving Sacred Dragon Legion Spirit Masters withdrew into Jialing Pass Fort, screened by the Spirit Empire's 8 heavy armor legions. But, along with their retreat, the Heaven Do Empire's Spirit Master Legion as well as Heaven Do Empire's light cavalry legions had also reached the front. One side had imposing manner like a rainbow, their assault led by more than 6,000 Spirit Masters, as well as absolute superiority in military strength. And the other side was already losing morale. Behind them stood the Jialing Pass Fort as well as 4 drawbridges. In the collision of steel rivers, human lives were reaped like grass by the god of death. The proper effect of Spirit Masters in battle was instantly revealed. Especially the Golden Iron Triangle's Golden Sacred Dragon charging furthest ahead, as well as Sword DouLuo and Bone DouLuo. The 3 powers were like tigers in a flock of sheep, opening a hole in the Spirit Empire's heavy legions in practically an instant. 6,000 Spirit Masters instantly dispersed, equally with support-type Spirit Masters in the rear, power attack types in front, agility attack types guarding the flanks. But the result was completely different from the Spirit Empire's Sacred Dragon Legion assault. The Sacred Dragon Legion had faced the Tang Army's godly Zudge crossbows, but now the Heaven Do Empire's Spirit Master Legion faced common soldiers. Although they were heavily armored, what use was that before Spirit Masters? Flame and Cold Ice attributed abilities were the first to appear on the battlefield, the 4 Element Academy students showing their strength. Fire and Flood has no mercy, these 2 great absolute elemental forces basically couldn't be resisted by armor. Following close behind them, the Tang sect's Defense Hall and Medicine Hall disciples formed the core of the vanguard. Defense Hall disciples in front, Medicine Hall disciples behind, the 2 united. The heavy armored soldiers' attacks fell on the Defense Hall disciples' plate armored giant rhinoceros defense, no different than tickling a leather boot. But, the soul-breaking spears stabbing over the shoulders and between the sides of the Defense Hall disciples split their heavy armor like paper. With practically each step the Defense Hall disciples took, 200 corpses would fall among the Spirit Empire's heavy armored legions. 6,000 Spirit Masters were like a dagger stabbed into the back of the enemy formation. The circumstances that should have appeared when the Spirit Empire attacked the Heaven Do Empire's heavy legions, now appeared among the Spirit Empire's own troops. The losses were disastrous, shocking. Above on the walls of Jialing Pass, the generals from the constituent kingdoms and duchies were already kneeling on the ground. "Your Majesty, hurry up and send the Spirit Master legions to support. Our heavy legions can't hold out." "Yes. Your Majesty, these are our elites. Our Jialing Pass only has these 80,000 heavy soldiers. If they're rooted by the Heaven Do Empire, how can we guard the pass?" "Your Majesty, 1 heavy cavalry legion is already annihilated. Give the orders immediately. If this goes on, the heavy legions are finished." Heavy legions were extremely important to any nation. The resources required to form a single heavy legion was almost that of 10 ordinary infantry legions. Whether in terms of equipment or quality of the troops, they were all the highest in the army. For the kingdoms and duchies formerly part of the Heaven Do and Star Luo great empires, forming 2 heavy legions each was already very difficult. Now that they saw these precious troops being butchered by the Heaven Do Imperial Army's attack, how could they not be distressed? Bibi Dong looked at these ranking officers with a grave expression, speaking firmly. The Spirit Master legions can't go to battle again. As I said, they can't be placed in any danger before we understand what weapon it was that killed so many Spirit Masters before. Even if the heavy legions are important, you must understand that the Spirit Master legions have a decisive effect. As long as the Angel Legion is still here, relying on the natural stronghold of Jialing Pass, we won't fear being broken through by the Heaven Do Empire. Come. Pass on my orders, completely launch long-range attacks, screen the heavy legion's retreat. Angel Legion guard within the walls. If enemy troops pursue inside, immediately block them. Listening to Bibi Dong's orders, the kneeling generals couldn't help looking at each other, their eyes filled with resentment. Of course, they wouldn't dare oppose Bibi Dong's orders. After all, nobody was tired of living. But in their hearts, a dark seed was already quietly sprouting. Bibi Dong's orders engendered a kind of feeling like, your Spirit Master legions are elite, our soldiers aren't even human. The officers quieted down, but their appearance of having the courage for anger but not for speech still made Bibi Dong even more depressed. Even since the founding of the Spirit Empire, she had always been full of confidence. But at this moment, she discovered that on a true battlefield, she wasn't equal to long-time battlefield commanders. She could still command Spirit Master battles, but after the battlefield turned chaotic, she was a bit panicked. Of course, this wasn't enough to change Bibi Dong's decision. To her, there was nothing more important than her subordinate Spirit Masters. The ballista guarding Jialing Pass began to show their might, constantly spraying the battlefield below with sharp arrows together with numerous archers. Marshal Ji Long was already prepared. Seeing that his troops had already entered enemy attack range, he immediately passed on orders. The 2 wings of 10 light cavalry legions that had charged into the battlefield immediately dispersed, moving into the rear via 2 large arcs. They didn't go far, but rather formed up in dense formations 5 li from the battlefield, prepared to support the front at any time. Common arrows were basically no threat to heavy cavalry. Each heavy cavalry soldier was like a metal pot, even their horses were wrapped in armor. The arrows could only strike sparks off their armor. The direct threat was the fortress ballistae. Jialing Pass had no less than 150 of them, each using 1 meter 20 long bolts. With their sudden eruption, within a kilometer, their attack power wasn't less than that of the godly Zudge crossbows. Even ordinary Spirit Masters wouldn't dare take them head-on. Of course, the fortress ballistae firing rate couldn't compare to the godly Zudge crossbow, and as long as one was prepared, it was difficult for these ballistae to hit the Spirit Masters they aimed at. Moreover, the bolts were so enormous that high-level Spirit Masters that were somewhat prepared could easily intercept them. But even so, under the attack of the ballistae, the Heaven Do Empire's casualties gradually mounted. The Spirit Empire's 8 great heavy legions withdrew to the sides. They no longer had any fighting spirit, and the majority had withdrawn across the drawbridges. After reaching a fortified position, cooperating with the ballistae and bows on the walls, the situation finally stabilized. If Grandmaster now led the Spirit Master Legion to assault, then these miserable heavy soldiers of course wouldn't be enough to stop them. That giant hole in the Jialing Pass walls was right before them. But Grandmaster didn't do this. After their assault was repulsed a few times, Grandmaster and Marshal Ji Long exchanged looks, and immediately ordered withdrawal. The drum sounded the retreat. This time the Heaven Do Empire had dispatched all cavalry. Even though the heavy cavalry couldn't compare to the speed of the light cavalry, they were still much faster than infantry. Shortly, large numbers of soldiers withdrew like a tide. Grandmaster led the Spirit Master Legion to guard the rear, to prevent any Spirit Empire counterattack. Elsewhere, the Shrek 7 Devils had also caught up, and met up with Grandmaster and the others. "Little San, your trident?" Grandmaster asked Tang San somewhat anxiously. With his research on Spirit Masters, he naturally saw the contrast in strength between Tang San and Bibi Dong. If he didn't have the Sea God trident, Tang San absolutely wouldn't be able to block Bibi Dong's attacks. Tang San said, "Teacher, I have my ways. Don't worry." While speaking, his figure quietly disappeared, shielded by the surrounding Spirit Masters. How could he surrender his absolute diving weapon? The vast sea barrier's stealth effect made him disappear into thin air, and he quietly separated from the retreating army, rushing towards Jialing Pass like a bolt of lightning. The moat before the Jialing Pass fort was already completely dyed red, countless corpses left behind. The vast majority belonged to the Spirit Empire. Tang San quietly stole towards Jialing Pass. As long as he got close to the moat, he wouldn't even have to pass the water. He was sure he could return his sea god trident with controlling crane catching dragon. Bibi Dong might be powerful, but even if he couldn't match her head-on, it was still impossible for her to hold him back. But, just as Tang San was about to reach the range at which he could use controlling crane catching dragon, he felt his whole body tighten. On the walls, Bibi Dong's gaze was already aimed at him like a sharp sword. How was it possible? Tang San was shocked, subconsciously throwing himself sideways. With a bang, a big crossbow bolt suddenly erupted next to him, personally loosed by Bibi Dong. Tang San was stunned, and didn't dare move forward. But he didn't understand how. His mental strength was even a bit above Bibi Dong's, so as long as he relied on the protection of the vast sea barrier and didn't attack with spirit abilities, Bibi Dong ordinarily couldn't have discovered him before he had retrieved the sea god trident. Bibi Dong stood on the walls, coldly gazing in Tang San's direction. True, just her spirit power naturally wasn't enough to discover Tang San. But when her gaze fell on the sea god trident, she had already expected that Tang San would come retrieve this weapon capable of contending with her. Consequently, Bibi Dong's gaze was always fixed in Tang San's direction. Even though Tang San hid very stealthily in the Spirit Master Legion, she had still noticed. Among the title DouLuo on Bibi Dong's side was one with a peculiar ability, able to connect his mental strength with that of others. Bibi Dong's mental strength alone wasn't enough to discover Tang San, but by meticulously paying attention, joining together with another title DouLuo's mental strength, and reducing the search range, she still caught him. Nimbly falling back, Tang San might as well no longer hide. Revealing himself, he gazed at Bibi Dong up on the walls, his face brimming with a faint cold smile. Want to stop me from getting the sea god trident like this? In terms of strength, Bibi Dong of course had the confidence, but, the sea god trident was a weapon belonging to the sea god, how could someone else easily touch it? Tang San stopped while still around 2 kilometers from Jialing Pass, searching for a smooth and flat space on the battlefield, where he sat down cross-legged. Instantly focusing his mental strength, the sea god trident brand on his forehead abruptly flashed, intense golden light shining, coloring Tang San's body. In the previous battle with Bibi Dong, Tang San had undoubtedly exhausted himself enormously. The sea god trident had admittedly seriously injured Bibi Dong, but by using that one goes without return, Tang San's own spirit power was also exhausted. In a battle against a power on Bibi Dong's level, every second that passed would be exhausting. But Tang San hadn't spent too much mental strength, just what it took for the sea god's light to activate the sea god trident. Compared to his spirit power, his mental strength was still adequate. And in fact, while Bibi Dong's attack back then might seem fatal, Tang San still had some aces left. One goes without return didn't manage to block Bibi Dong's attack, but Tang San was confident her space-rending abyss cut wouldn't kill him. His confidence was in the spirit power he had once used to contend with Bibi Dong, and even exceeded hers. At that time he had been waiting for the space-rending abyss cut to reach a certain distance from him, so as not to give Bibi Dong the chance to react. He might end up injured, but as long as he used the purple demon eye at that moment, it was impossible for Bibi Dong's attack to hit him squarely. How would Tang San be so careless as to leave himself without any means? This was also why he was so enormously regretful when he saw Xiao Wu block the attack for him. Now Tang San's mental strength rose once again, completely congealing on the sea god trident brand. His body looked as if dipped in liquid gold. Starting from the top of his head, he was rendered completely golden in just a few breaths' time. Overbearing energy fluctuations emerged in this instant, frightening mental waves rising to the peak in a split second. Indeed, there was no forest here, so Tang San was unable to use the blue-silver domain to amplify his mental strength, but he still had another domain. Blended white and red-colored light appeared over Tang San, instantly enveloping his whole body. The light remained without scattering, only surrounding him, but even when condensed over such a small area, that focused terrifying killing intent still pointed straight at Bibi Dong up on Jialing Pass. What was he doing? Bibi Dong scowled. She didn't believe Tang San would dare come retrieve that mystical trident while targeted by her. If he really did, then with the strength of the title DouLuo next to her, he would inevitably never return. But where he stopped, 2 kilometers away, was at a distance spirit abilities couldn't hope to reach. What could he hope to do at such range? Tang San very soon provided the answer. He sharply opened his eyes, now turned completely golden. The compacted Death God domain wrapped him up in an instant. White and red lights carrying terrifying extreme killing intent merged into his eyes, and shot out as golden light. The two rays of light fused together in the air, alternately bursting with red and white. It actually crossed that 2-kilometer distance, closing on Bibi Dong on Jialing Pass. The split-second Tang San released that light, Bibi Dong felt how her energies were locked inside her body, even the air around her seemed to be pulled away. That absolutely wasn't as simple as killing intent taking form. That it could still give her such a reaction at such a distance proved that there was a major problem. The extremely terrifying point of killing intent was like a giant maw, even surrounded by several tidal DouLuo. In this moment Bibi Dong still felt helpless and alone. Deeply golden light enveloping that intense red and white light, the 2-kilometer distance disappeared in a moment. Bibi Dong gave a fierce hiss, the spider web pattern on her forehead suddenly turning dark purple, compacting into a ray of dark purple light that went to meet it. Even she herself felt an intense danger in this moment. She'd once clashed with Tang San in mental strength, but even though Tang San's mental strength was already deep as the sea at the time, his spirit power was still only rank 80-something. Now Tang San's spirit power had already truly stepped into the tidal DouLuo level, and his mental strength had naturally risen with it. But this still wasn't most important. Most important was that Tang San possessed a unique ability like the purple demon eye that could condense all mental strength to attack a single point. And Bibi Dong didn't. This was also an important reason Tang San could launch in across 2 kilometers while Bibi Dong couldn't. But, as that golden light was just about to arrive, and Bibi Dong had already prepared herself to suffer a violent mental attack, and drawn out large amounts of mental strength from that tidal DouLuo connected to her in order to defend herself, the golden light that should originally have struck her, suddenly changed directions after passing the moat, suddenly turning straight down and falling directly on the sea god trident. Duped. This was Bibi Dong's first thought. Leaping up without the slightest hesitation, she launched herself straight at the sea god trident below. What Grandmaster understood, she of course also understood. As long as Tang San was unable to get back this true divine tool, his strength would directly fall by a level. She would be even more certain of killing him in their next fight. Consequently, no matter what, Bibi Dong absolutely wouldn't quietly watch Tang San take this weapon away. But at this moment, 2 kilometers away Tang San had already leapt up, the blue-silver emperor right leg bone and evil spirit orca left leg bone simultaneously issuing force, launching him towards Jialing Pass like an artillery shell. Bibi Dong's reaction was undoubtedly very fast, but she still wasn't faster than light. That golden-purple demon eye with the red and white colored lights directly hit charged towards the ground, and as if it had eyes, it fell squarely on the sea god's heart below the sea god trident's main blade. Bibi Dong was just falling from above, lunging towards the sea god trident. She had to stop Tang San from retrieving it. Just as she was putting even more energy on reaching it before Tang San, suddenly, the golden light that had rushed into the ground abruptly returned. All of a sudden, Bibi Dong could only once again erupt with the mental energy she had just withdrawn, the dark purple energy just managing to sweep across her body before it violently collided with that golden ray. And meanwhile, the sea god trident embedded in the earth exploded with incomparably intense golden light. Boom! Bibi Dong felt as if her brain had burst, violent pain engulfing her whole body. That golden ray wasn't just filled with the frightening mental attack, but at the same time also held the divine presence of the sea god trident, as well as vast killing intent compressed to the extreme. That kind of killing intent didn't just give her pressure and fear, but was also somewhat familiar. Her vision going blank, Bibi Dong's already injured body bled simultaneously from eyes, nose, mouth, and ears, making her seem extremely scary. Flung away by that intense attack, she heavily struck the walls. Meanwhile, that tidal DouLuo supplying Bibi Dong with mental strength equally bled from all orifices and went limp, collapsing paralyzed on the walls. Mental clashes were even more dangerous than spirit ability collisions. Even with tidal DouLuo level strength, if there was any problem, it was very possibly fatal. And now Tang San had already reached the edge of the moat. With a wave of his right hand, under the gazes of the several tens of thousands of Spirit Empire generals, soldiers, and spirit masters on Jialing Pass, the sea god trident rose like a golden dragon, returning to his palm. Tang San didn't halt, he didn't even glance at the seriously injured Bibi Dong. Soaring up, he returned towards his own side. The 6 tidal DouLuo on the walls still with the strength to fight didn't dare chase after him, and could only helplessly watch Tang San float away. He had to hold out, he absolutely had to hold out. Tang San constantly shouted at himself in his heart. He of course knew that Bibi Dong was seriously hurt, but right now he was practically running on fumes. He was certain that if he launched another attack condensing the last of his strength on Bibi Dong, while Bibi Dong might not die, she would suffer even more appalling injuries. But if he did so, he would pay with his own life. How did Tang San end up so weak? It was because of that golden light. For an attack that could even harm Bibi Dong this way, how could he pay any less? For that one attack, Tang San had paid with practically all his mental strength and spirit power. The spirit power erupted via the purple demon eye. The spirit power was instantly condensed in the Death God domain. His two great domains had simultaneously evolved as his spirit power entered the tidal DouLuo level. The blue-silver domain's final evolved ability was All Rivers Run into the Sea, and the Death God domain's final evolved ability could be called Azure Manifestation. Just as Tang San was once told by his great-grandfather Tang Chen, Slaughter City was established by the Azure God, only it was tainted by the Rakshasa God. But in the end this Death God domain was a power belonging to Azure. Even though it wasn't the true strength, after it evolved to its highest degree of loyalty, it could still produce a portion of Azure's divine might. Just that attack was the final evolved ability of the Death God domain, Azure Manifestation. But it didn't cause Azure's image to appear. This confused Bibi Dong. Then he again temporarily drew on the fusion of Azure's strength and his own purple demon eye, and launched it. Otherwise, even if his mental strength was powerful, how would it be possible to injure Bibi Dong at a 2-kilometer distance? Even so, Tang San's attack had still weakened after spanning the whole distance, and Bibi Dong's defense was at close quarters. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible for Tang San's attack to harm Bibi Dong. But, it was also at this moment that Tang San revealed his control strength and intelligence and wisdom in battle. He forcefully controlled this purple demon eye's Azure demon light to drop, illuminating the Sea God Trident's Sea God's heart. The Sea God's heart was stimulated by the Sea God's light, and instantly erupted with the power of the Sea God, merging it into the Azure demon light, instantly also completely connecting with Tang San through this mental strength. Under Tang San's control, the Sea God's heart had provided a reflective effect like a mirror, not only making up for the Azure demon light's losses after crossing 2 kilometers with Sea God's power, but simultaneously also joining its own divine presence into it, completely revealing the might of this attack. And on the other side, Bibi Dong had almost subconsciously assumed Tang San's goal was the Sea God Trident when his attack changed direction, and was about to retrieve it. Consequently, she paid even more attention to Tang San himself, and only thought of how she would stop him from getting the trident back. Who would have thought that the light that made even her feel intensely terrified would actually be reflected, again descending on her? With her attention elsewhere, Bibi Dong's defenses weren't as good as on the walls, and was instantly heavily injured, and simultaneously also implicated the tidal DouLuo feeding her mental strength. Of course, only Tang San himself understood all these details. Even the now seriously injured Bibi Dong didn't understand how Tang San did it. But, all this happened before the eyes of both armies, and they had their own thoughts. They only saw Bibi Dong in defeat, bleeding from the apertures on her head, striking the walls and falling from Jialing Pass, while Tang San proudly took back the Sea God Trident. They didn't see Tang San's weakness. It's end here. See you, like us, and subscribes and shares to your Soul Land fans. Lastly, come on comments and request updates. Woohoo, good luck.